My name is Donellan. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent the last 22 years building my construction company from the ground up here in Denver, Colorado. What started as a one-man operation with a beat-up pickup truck is now worth just over $3 million. I learned early that success isn't just about working hard. It's about working smart, understanding contracts inside and out, and always having a backup plan. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. 6 months ago, my childhood best friend Reese Halton showed up at my doorstep with 2 duffel bags and the kind of hollow look that comes with a messy divorce. We'd grown up together in small-town Kansas, played high school football side by side, and even though we'd taken different paths, him into commercial real estate, me into construction, we'd stayed close. When he told me his ex-wife had cleaned him out in their divorce settlement and he needed a place to crash while he rebuilt his career, I didn't hesitate. "Stay as long as you need," I told him, showing him to the guest room in our 4-bedroom house in Cherry Hills Village. My wife Laura seemed genuinely pleased to have company. She'd always complained that our neighborhood was too quiet, that we needed more excitement in our lives. Reese had always been the charming one between us. In high school, while I was studying for my contractor's license exam, he was sweet-talking his way into dates with the homecoming queen. That charm had served him well in real estate, at least until his divorce attorney fees and alimony payments ate through his savings. What I didn't realize then was how much that charm would cost me. The first month went smoothly. Reese would leave early each morning, working to rebuild his client base from scratch. His ex-wife had gotten their shared office in the divorce, along with most of their mutual contacts. Laura, who worked part-time as an interior designer, would spend her mornings at the gym and afternoons either at client meetings or shopping. I was busy with a major commercial project downtown, a 12-story office building that would net us our biggest profit margin yet. Around the 6-week mark, I started noticing small changes. Laura began wearing perfume around the house, something she'd rarely done in our 15 years of marriage. She started asking more questions about Reese's work, his plans, his financial prospects. "Poor guy," she'd say, "losing so much in that divorce, but he's got such good instincts for business. I'm sure he'll bounce back bigger than before." What I didn't know was that Laura had formed some very specific assumptions about Reese's potential for success. She'd seen him in his expensive suits, leftovers from his previous lifestyle, and noticed his confident demeanor when discussing market trends. To someone who didn't understand the real estate business, Reese's industry knowledge and professional vocabulary made him sound like a man on the verge of a major comeback. The truth was messier. Reese was essentially starting over at 46, with limited capital and a reputation damaged by his contentious divorce. His ex-wife had systematically poisoned several professional relationships during their split, claiming he'd mismanaged their joint ventures. But Laura saw only the surface, a successful-looking man temporarily down on his luck, someone who'd clearly be wealthy again soon. By the 2-month mark, I began noticing longer conversations between them when I came home from work. They'd be sitting at the kitchen island with glasses of wine, discussing everything from property values to investment strategies. Laura hung on every word as Reese described deals he was evaluating and contacts he was cultivating. "Reese was just telling me about that commercial property opportunity in Boulder," she'd tell me when I walked in. "Sounds like it could be really promising." I'd nod politely, not mentioning that Reese had confided in me just days earlier about his mounting credit card debt and his concern about making his car payments. The gap between what Laura believed and what I knew was growing wider every day. The truth hit me on a Friday evening in early December, about 4 months after Reese had moved in. I'd forgotten some project blueprints at home and returned around 6:30 to grab them before a weekend site inspection. Both cars were in the driveway, but the house felt unusually quiet when I walked in through the garage door. I called out but got no answer. That's when I heard Laura's distinctive laugh drifting down from upstairs. Not her normal laugh, but the soft, intimate one I hadn't heard directed at anyone in years. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, my hand gripping the banister as the reality of what was happening crystallized. The muffled voices, the creaking of floorboards above, the unmistakable sounds of betrayal coming from our bedroom. Most men would have charged up those stairs. Most men would have kicked down the door, started yelling, maybe thrown punches. But 22 years of running a construction business had taught me that the biggest disasters happen when you act on pure emotion instead of calculated strategy. So I grabbed my blueprints from the kitchen counter, got back in my truck and drove to the job site like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. While I spent the next 2 hours reviewing foundation specs and checking measurements, my mind was working through a completely different structural problem. How long had this been going on? What exactly did Lara think she was gaining? And most importantly, what did I need to do to protect everything I'd spent 2 decades building? Over the following week, I watched them with completely new eyes. The way Reese would briefly touch her shoulder when passing behind her chair. The way Lara would find excuses to walk past him in her yoga clothes after her morning workouts. The inside jokes that would stop mid-sentence when I entered a room. It was like watching amateur actors who thought their audience was blind. What struck me most was listening to their conversations when they assumed I wasn't paying attention. Lara had constructed an elaborate fantasy about Reese's financial recovery. She'd convinced herself that his current struggles were just a temporary setback and that he was positioning himself for some major business breakthrough. Once you close that Denver Tech Center deal, she'd tell him over morning coffee, you should really consider expanding into commercial development like you mentioned. Reese would nod thoughtfully and make vague comments about timing the market and waiting for the right partnership opportunities. He never explicitly lied to her about having specific deals in progress, but he certainly never corrected her assumptions. It was masterful manipulation. He was getting everything he wanted while maintaining plausible deniability about any deception. But I had advantages they didn't know about. Running a multi-million-dollar construction company for over 2 decades had taught me the critical importance of asset protection and legal preparation. More importantly, it had trained me to think several moves ahead of any potential threat. My first call was to Marcus Chen, the attorney who'd handled all my business structures since I'd incorporated. I want to review our asset protection strategy, I told him during a meeting the following Monday. Make sure everything's optimally structured from a legal standpoint. Marcus had known me long enough to sense when something significant was brewing. Any particular concerns I should know about? Let's just say I want to be prepared for any eventuality that might arise. Over the next month, we methodically restructured everything. The house, which had been jointly owned, was transferred into a family trust established years earlier, with me as the sole trustee and beneficiary. My business assets, which had always been separately owned, were moved into additional liability protection structures. The joint banking accounts were gradually shifted to individual accounts with appropriate legal documentation. None of this was unusual or suspicious. Successful contractors routinely use trusts and LLCs for asset protection against potential lawsuits or business liabilities. What was different was the comprehensive nature of the restructuring and the speed with which we implemented it. The beautiful part was watching how confident they were becoming. Lara started mentioning improvements she wanted to make to the house, talking about renovations like someone who expected to be living there for years. Reese began discussing business opportunities that would require significant capital backing, always with the implication that such backing would naturally be available. They were already spending money they assumed they'd have access to, making plans for a future built entirely on their shared delusion about both Reese's prospects and Lara's legal position. I let them plan. I let them dream. And I continued building my legal fortress, one carefully drafted document at a time. By late December, they'd stopped even pretending to be discreet. Lara suggested we skip our traditional Christmas dinner with my parents in Kansas, claiming she wanted to make sure Reese doesn't feel alone during his first holiday season after the divorce. The irony was perfect. She was concerned about his emotional well-being while actively helping him betray his closest friend. I agreed to stay in Denver, naturally. It gave me the ideal opportunity to observe their dynamic without family distractions. What I witnessed was even more revealing than I'd expected. They moved around each other with the familiarity of a long-established couple. Lara served Reese prime rib with the attentiveness she used to show me. Reese carved the roast like he was the head of the household. "Clay, you should hear about this mixed-use development Reese is putting together," Lara said over dinner, her eyes bright with excitement. "It sounds like exactly the kind of project where you two could really partner effectively." I looked at Reese, who had the grace to appear slightly uncomfortable. "What development is that?" "Well, it's still in the preliminary stages," he said, focusing intently on cutting his meat. "Just exploring various possibilities with some potential investors." What he didn't mention, what Lara had no way of knowing, was that Reese's real estate license was already under review for unpaid professional dues and continuing education deficiencies. The development project existed only in the conversations they shared, another piece of the elaborate fiction they were constructing together. But I played my part perfectly. "That does sound interesting. We should definitely discuss the details when you're ready." The smile Lara gave me was radiant. She genuinely believed she was orchestrating the perfect scenario. A successful husband and an equally successful lover. Maybe even a business partnership that would make them all wealthy together. She had no idea she was living in a fantasy I was systematically dismantling. The new year brought fresh complications for Reese. In mid-January, his BMW was repossessed from our driveway at 7 in the morning. He told Lara it was a temporary misunderstanding with the financing company that would be resolved within days. She believed him completely and immediately offered him unlimited use of her Mercedes when he needed to meet with clients. That same week, I received the first of several eye-opening phone calls. Tom Patterson, a commercial developer I'd worked with for over a decade, called with what he thought was a routine question. "Clay, I hope you don't mind me checking, but that associate of yours, Reese Halton, listed you as a business reference for a project financing proposal. Just wanted to confirm the nature of your working relationship." "I appreciate you calling first," I told him. "What exactly did he say about our arrangement?" "He implied you two were business partners, that your company would be handling construction services for his developments. Suggested you'd be willing to guarantee some of his performance obligations." I had never partnered with Reese on anything. I had never agreed to guarantee his work. He was using our personal friendship as collateral for business deals he had no ability to deliver on, all while sleeping with my wife in my own home. That conversation led to others. Over the following weeks, I discovered that Reese had used my name and reputation with at least 8 different investors, 2 banks, and several potential development partners. He'd painted himself as my business associate, suggesting that my company's success somehow validated his own expertise and financial backing. So, I started making my own calls. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be construed as vindictive. Just straightforward conversations with people who mattered in Denver's construction and development community. "Hi, Tom. Just wanted to clarify that Reese Halton isn't affiliated with my company in any official capacity." "Hello, Sarah. Heard my name came up in connection with some real estate proposals. Wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion about my actual involvement." Within 3 weeks, Reese's prospects had evaporated. Not because I'd spoken against him, but because I'd simply clarified the truth. Without my implied endorsement and financial backing, his proposals looked exactly like what they were: desperate pitches from a recently divorced real estate agent with no capital, no established business relationships, and no track record of successful development projects. I watched him grow increasingly frustrated as deals fell through, and phone calls stopped being returned. He'd sit at my kitchen table with his laptop open, making call after call to people who were suddenly unavailable or had decided to go in a different direction. Lara would massage his shoulders and reassure him that the market was just going through a tough period. "Maybe you should focus on residential sales until the commercial market improves," she'd suggest. Reese's jaw would tighten. "The market's fine. It's just politics. People playing games instead of recognizing good opportunities." He wasn't wrong about games being played. He just had no idea who was playing them, what the rules were, or how badly he was losing. While he struggled with his collapsing career prospects, I was putting the finishing touches on my comprehensive legal preparations. By Valentine's Day, I was ready for whatever came next. Lara and Reese celebrated the holiday with champagne and talk of new beginnings and exciting changes ahead. I raised my glass with them, knowing that their excitement was about to transform into something very different. The most satisfying part was that I hadn't done anything ethically questionable. I'd simply stopped providing benefits I was never obligated to provide in the first place. The foundation of their entire plan had always depended on my continued generosity and implied support. When I quietly withdrew those advantages, their future collapsed under the weight of its own impossibility. The end came on a cold Tuesday morning in early March, though it didn't unfold the way I'd expected. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly financial reports when Lara knocked on the door, something she'd rarely done since Reese moved in. She was dressed in her best professional outfit, the navy blue suit she wore to important client presentations, and her expression mixed determination with barely controlled excitement. "Clay, we need to have a serious conversation," she announced, settling into the chair across from my desk like she was conducting a high-stakes business negotiation. "Of course," I replied, closing my laptop and giving her my complete attention. "I've been doing a lot of soul-searching about our marriage, about what I really want from my life moving forward," she began, her voice steady but clearly rehearsed. "I think it's time we both admitted that we've grown in different directions, that we want fundamentally different things from our futures." I nodded thoughtfully. "I see. What is it that you want, Lara?" "I want a divorce," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know this might seem sudden to you, but I've fallen in love with someone else. Someone who truly understands my dreams and shares my vision for what life could be." The irony was absolutely perfect. She thought she was delivering devastating news, but she was actually handing me exactly what I needed. A clean exit from our marriage that she was initiating entirely herself. "I'm sorry to hear our marriage has reached this point," I said calmly. "Who is this person you've fallen in love with?" A flush crept up her neck, but her voice remained confident. "It's Reese. I know how this must look, given that he's been staying here, but we didn't plan for this to happen. Sometimes real connections just develop naturally between people. He's been going through such a difficult transition, and we discovered we have this incredible emotional and intellectual compatibility." "Reese," I repeated, as if processing this information for the first time. "My friend Reese, who's been living in our guest room for the past 7 months. Yes, and I know the timing might seem awkward, but Clay, what we have is real love. The kind of deep partnership where two people can build something truly amazing together. He has such vision for his business expansion, and I could really contribute to that success." I almost felt sorry for her. She genuinely believed she was trading up, moving from a stable but supposedly boring contractor to a dynamic real estate entrepreneur on the verge of major success. The elaborate fantasy they'd constructed together was so complete that she couldn't see the reality sitting directly in front of her. "I understand," I said evenly. "What are you thinking in terms of the divorce arrangements?" Her eyes lit up with anticipation. This was clearly the part she'd been most looking forward to discussing. "Well, obviously we'll need to divide our marital assets fairly. The house, your business interests, the investment portfolios. I've already consulted with a divorce attorney, and he's confident I'm entitled to half of everything we've accumulated during our marriage." "That sounds reasonable in principle," I agreed. "Why don't you have your attorney contact Marcus Chen? He can provide him with all the necessary asset documentation." The confidence in her smile was beautiful to witness. She thought she was about to become independently wealthy. Half of a $3 million construction company, half of a house worth $800,000, half of what she assumed were substantial investment accounts and business holdings. 4 days later, her attorney called Marcus Chen. The conversation, as Marcus described it to me afterwards, was brief and utterly devastating. "Mr. Chen," the lawyer had said, "I'm representing Lara Donellan in her divorce proceedings. We'll need comprehensive documentation of all marital assets for proper equitable distribution." "Certainly," Marcus had replied in his characteristically precise manner. I should mention up front that there are very few marital assets subject to distribution. The house is held in a family trust that predates the marriage, with Mr. Donellan as the sole trustee and beneficiary. The construction business has always been his separate property, properly documented as such from inception. The joint checking and savings accounts contain approximately $900 total. Marcus told me the silence on the other end lasted nearly 45 seconds. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that information? Marcus did, providing additional legal details about trust structures, business ownership documentation, and asset protection protocols. Everything Lara thought she had a legal claim to was actually, indisputably, and permanently mine. When Lara came home that evening, she looked like someone who'd witnessed a fatal car accident. Reese was conspicuously absent. Apparently he'd gone for a long drive to process some unexpected developments after she'd shared the news with him earlier. "Clay," she said, her voice barely audible. "My attorney says there's been some kind of terrible mistake. He says I'm not legally entitled to any portion of the house or your business assets." "That's correct," I replied, not looking up from the contract revisions I was reviewing. "But that's impossible. We've been married for 15 years. I have legal rights to marital property." "You have exactly the rights that Colorado law provides," I said calmly, "which in this particular case amounts to your personal belongings and whatever's currently in our joint accounts." The color completely drained from her face as the full implications crashed over her. No house. No business equity. No substantial nest egg to fund her exciting new life with Reese. Just $900 and whatever clothes, jewelry, and personal items she could claim as individually hers. "You planned this whole thing," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I protected my assets," I corrected matter-of-factly, something any responsible business owner should do proactively. That night I could hear them arguing intensely in the guest room. Raised voices, accusations, the unmistakable sound of dreams disintegrating in real time. By the next morning, Reese was gone. He'd packed his original 2 duffel bags and vanished before dawn, leaving behind a woman who suddenly had nothing valuable to offer and no resources to share. The following weeks were a blur of legal procedures and asset verification. Lara's attorney fought as aggressively as he could, but the documentation was absolutely ironclad. Every trust, every LLC, every financial structure had been established and maintained in ways that completely protected my wealth. Meanwhile, word had spread throughout Denver's commercial real estate and development community about Reese's misrepresentations and failed business proposals. His professional reputation was destroyed, his license ultimately suspended, and his remaining industry connections permanently severed. He'd gambled his entire career on a future that had never existed outside his own desperate imagination. Today, 9 months later, I'm living peacefully alone in my house in Cherry Hills Village. Lara moved into a studio apartment in Aurora and now works full-time managing a furniture showroom while our divorce moves through final proceedings. Reese, from what I occasionally hear through mutual acquaintances, returned to Kansas where he's living with his elderly parents and working hourly construction jobs. Ironically, the same kind of honest manual labor he'd spent years trying to avoid. I learned something valuable from this entire experience. The most effective revenge doesn't require dramatic confrontations or elaborate schemes. Sometimes justice simply requires patience, careful preparation, and the wisdom to let people destroy themselves through their own greed and dishonesty. 22 years in construction taught me that the strongest buildings are built on solid foundations. The same principle applies to everything else in life, including justice itself. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.